I don't think that there's a blanket answer. I think that it helps, but I think that your strategy with OEM certifications needs to align with your strategy, your positioning, who you want to be.
Welcome to another episode of the Collision Vision, driven by Auto Body News. As always, I'm your host, Cole Strandberg. Today, I'm joined by someone who's seen the collision repair space from multiple angles: operations, insurance, and most recently, investing. Chris Calk is the former director of operations at GEICO, where he had a front row seat to one of the nation's largest DRP programs. Today, he's an active investor and advisor in the industry, helping collision operators grow their businesses and align with the ever-evolving expectations of insurers. In this conversation, we'll dive into what insurers like GEICO look for in the ideal DRP partner, how shops can position themselves for long-term success in these programs, and why strong DRP relationships matter now more than ever. Then we'll zoom out a bit and hear why Chris has doubled down on the collision repair ecosystem as an investor, what makes this space exciting, where the opportunities lie, and how operators can build businesses that attract outside capital. It's a rare chance to get behind the curtain perspectives on both the DRP model and the investor mindset all in one. Enjoy the show. Chris, thank you so much for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Hey, Cole, how are you?
Good, man. It's great to see you. Appreciate you taking some time today and looking forward to an amazing conversation. I gave a little bit of your background at the top of the show, but I don't think I did it entirely justice. Would love to hear who you are in your own words.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Cole. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been great to get to know you over the past year or so. My name is Chris Calk. I had a career at GEICO Insurance in the auto damage department. Started off low level, started as an adjuster, worked my way up fairly quickly, and spent 6 or 7 years managing the East Coast operations as a director of collision based out of our Washington, D.C. office. In that role, oversaw anything auto damage, had a large field team, had a DRP program, extremely important to us, and managed all of our total losses. Wholly responsible for regulators and everything that came along with that. Enjoyed the ride, and in 2023 decided that I wanted something a little bit different. So jumped out of the industry temporarily to get into M&A, and came back about a year ago as an investor, playing around in the collision space, but more focused on the suppliers and the service companies around collision shops. So enjoying it so far, and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, man. Yeah, listeners can see pretty quickly how we would have gotten connected. No question. We play around, I think, in a lot of the same areas around this industry. So really appreciate your perspective on things. I want to zoom out a little bit later in our conversation and talk about your role and your viewpoint and perspective as an investor. But before we do, I'd be remiss not to spend a fair bit of time focused on your role at GEICO. So I want to start with, when you were in that role, how did you view the role of DRPs as a part of your business from an insurer's perspective?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, Cole, it evolved over time. Obviously, our industry changed quite a bit from 2010 to 2025 with COVID and all of that. But vital, I think, in a word, is what I would say. It was a large lever for us to manage efficiencies, to manage customer service, to manage costs, to manage our relationships with body shops. It was probably one of the most important things that we did. It gave us the ability to concentrate our conversations with the best shops out there. And I used it personally as a tool to drive relationships with those shops so that we could create better customer service interactions and ultimately meet the goal that we all share on both sides with insurers and body shops to get that car back safely to the customer in a repaired condition. So a lot of different angles to it. I would say that we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but the power of that lever, I would say, changed over the course of that period, right? That it's not as strong as it was as the industry dynamics changed with higher total loss frequency, MSO consolidation, and all of that. It became a different tool, a little bit less powerful tool in some ways, but still incredibly valuable, a very important tool for all insurers, I believe.
You were in that business at a fascinating time, and I'm going to relay kind of my perspective as an outsider, never having worked for an insurer, but the power dynamics leading up to COVID, in COVID, and post COVID, some amazing whiplash just back
Yeah.
and forth with who has the power. Leading up to COVID, it was kind of as it always was to an extent, a relatively equal dynamic of supply and demand of body shops willing to bring on DRPs and DRPs being open for business to body shops. COVID comes along. Very famously, we have this barrage of business coming into body shops, these lengthy wait times in many cases for shops where, hey, we don't need these DRPs. We don't need these insurers. And again, from an outsider's perspective, we see supply and demand at work where rates are beginning to creep up to bring shops back in. And obviously here over the past 12 months, maybe a little bit less, that has again shifted where DRPs are getting pickier and pickier. Shops need the work more than ever. The power is really back in the hands of the insurers. So super, super interesting shifts that you saw and now are on a bit of another side seeing. Back to the basics though, on the DRP piece, what are the core objectives that you as an insurer had in a DRP program? I know the immediate thing that comes to mind for shops in many cases is cost control, but tell me it goes far beyond that.
It does. It does. It at the end of the day, an insurance company is a financial institution, right? And so it's a critical part. You have to manage your cost control in order to be a successful financial institution, right? So we do. I wouldn't say that we lead with that, but it is one of the top three areas that we focus on whenever we're picking a DRP. Like any shop out there, customer relationships are critical. Insurance companies, especially the big eight, they invest a lot into their brand. And I guess if you take the origin of a DRP all the way back, why did they start doing it? It was really a perk. It was supposed to be a perk for the policyholders, and then it evolved into something much more complex into what it is today. But these companies are putting a lot in billions, literally, into building up their name. And
we all know that green lizard very well.
We know the green lizard. He's a very, very expensive lizard that
charismatic
costs
fellow.
a lot to get onto the NFL spotlight and all of that. But at the end of the day, the insurance companies are very good at bringing customers in. They're very good at underwriting. They're very good at pricing policies. They're not very good at fixing cars, right? And they realize that that's a weakness of theirs. And if you don't have a DRP system program, or even with companies that have a robust DRP system, there's pockets throughout the country where it might be lighter or weaker. It's more difficult for the insurers to manage the customer experience. And so what does that mean? If you're investing a lot into bringing a customer in, between $400 and $1,000 to bring one customer in as a policyholder, and you lose them as soon as they have a claim, well, that's not good, because you just paid out on their claim and then they leave because they had a poor customer experience. And so you see that. You really do see that in the data where you don't have a DRP system. The customers aren't as happy and they will leave. And so for us, it is critical to make sure that we partner with shops that have that same clarity as to what's really important, and work together to create a North Star that we can all work to using KPIs and constant communication and all of that to make sure that customer is given the experience that they deserve. And that's a win-win for everybody, right? I think your last guy said win-win-win. I would agree with that. The other piece would be efficiency. We had not many carriers have large field teams anymore. GEICO still does. Maybe one or two others still have large field teams, but if you have a fragmented base of shops that you're going to, hundreds of shops across any given city, and you have a field team that has to visit those, you can imagine how inefficient that can be. The claims process is still inefficient today, even in spite of all the technology that's out there. And so concentrating as many claims as you can at one location for any given area at a trusted facility can increase your efficiency as an insurer quite considerably. So that's a form of cost control. But what that means is actually customer experience as well, because we know, again, according to the data, that if you handle a claim faster, it's a better customer experience. It's less rental. It's less backlog in the shops. The shops aren't waiting on the insurers. All of that kind of goes together. And so the way I always looked at it was it's intertwined. If you handle a claim correctly, it's going to cost you less as an insurer. It's going to be less disruptive and easier for the shops to process. And also, it's going to be a better customer experience as well, because they feel the results of everything coming together. And so we try to create that scenario.
There we go. That win-win-win. Shout out to Sean Broadfield for that statement. I think it rings absolutely true. And the origin story of DRPs is interesting. I do think it merits double clicking. Like, this was marketing fees, and it still is to an extent. When you look at what a DRP costs you in terms of discount on rates or whatever, it comes back to it's a marketing fee for you from a shop's perspective. It's much more than that from an insurer's perspective, but I digress. So we've talked about the power dynamics shifting today, and insurers now are less inclined to just immediately throw a bunch of shops on programs. They're a little bit pickier. So if you're listening to this as a shop owner wanting to and interested in getting on an additional DRP or more DRPs, how would you position yourselves to be that partner of choice to your insurers of choice?
Okay. Well, maybe let me dive into that a little bit, and maybe it would be good to provide some context as to what's happening. And so we discussed the power dynamics, how they shifted. What does an insurance company give in return for everything, the stuff that you have to do as a shop to be on a program? It's volume in most cases, right? And we went through the industry, but from my perspective, we went through a period where we had plenty of DRP facilities through, say, 2019. And then in 2020, we had way too many because we all know what happened. But then after that, we didn't have nearly enough. And so we couldn't give our customers the experience that they needed or that they wanted, because all shops, including DRPs, were very full. Well, since then, that's changed quite a bit, as we all know. And so an insurer, what they're doing is they're literally looking at a map, and that map is going to have their policyholders, policies in force, and down to the zip code or down to the location, and they need to line up the location of their partner facilities with where their policyholders live, or more specifically, where they get in accidents, where their cars need to be repaired. And so today, what's happening is the volume is down, and the insurers can't promise the volume if you have too many shops in one area, right? Customer gets in a claim or has a claim once every 7 years or so. You can calculate how many shops, how many claims you're going to have down to the zip code, almost to the day. And so if you have not enough claims in a given area, you can't promise that volume to any shops. And so what do? If you're in an operator's shoes at an insurance company, you look at the partners that are in the area and you say, okay, which of these shops is performing the best? And how can I quote unquote reward them, or how do I expand that relationship with them to increase their volume potentially? And what does that mean? That means giving the customers in that area a better experience in the eyes of the insurer. So, so that's what's happening. And so the competition to get onto a DRP program has increased over the past few years. Whether it will stay that way, who knows? But it has increased. But it's not terribly complex. I mean, how do you position yourself? You're got to have great customer service. You got to care about the customer. You got to have great communication. The collision industry, things will go wrong every day. We all deal with something that's just crazy, and it happens. And I had many partners that would try to hide that, or they wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't tell me if they were just overwhelmed, or maybe they took on my program, but they were also talking to another big eight, and then they turned them all on at the same time. And now, they told me that they would prioritize, but they also told the others that they would prioritize, right? And so it's really about, the way I would think about it is, what is your positioning as a shop, right? What do you want to be? And I would think about, like, what's your goal? Are you planning to sell in a few years? Are you planning to grow organically? What OEM certifications do you have? Do you want OEM certifications? Does that positioning line up with any sort of with a specific insurer? And so if you know that specific insurer, then their requirements. You can go talk to other DRPs of that insurer, and what are they looking for? And you can put in place the certifications, the look that insurer might be going for. Collision is also very much a local game. Even the insurers who are taking the claims most of the time, and they're processing DRP claims in another state now, right? It wasn't always like that, but I think now most of them, or all of them, have centralized teams that are processing these. They're still inherently local. Insurance companies are still inherently local, even though they're national organizations. And so they're dependent on the feedback of those local teams for things like rates, for the ears on the ground, what's happening in that specific market, and it helps them make decisions at the top level. And so I would ask myself, do I like the team, right? And what is that team telling me? Have you reached out to the local team, and is there a fit there? Do you agree with what they're saying? And so if I were in the shop, if I were on the other side of it, I would probably shop around. I would probably make sure that I understand all of the different insurers, and I would pick a couple, and I would try to position myself in a way that they are looking for, that those specific ones are looking for. I would engage in conversations with those over time. I would increase trust, because again, communication is huge. When I was a director, if somebody that I never heard of called me and said that they wanted to be on the program, the very first thing I'm doing is calling my field adjusters, my field team. How are these guys? Have you worked with them before? And I'll get some really quick feedback right then and there, right? So most of the time it's good, but not
Sure.
always. And so we have to. So I emphasize the communication part of it even before the program, and then obviously the certifications and stuff that we all know about.
Well, that's a good point too, Chris. Sorry to interrupt here, but we had a series earlier this year all about OEM certifications.
Yeah.
And in some conversations, it turned into an OEM versus DRP battle. In most, it was acknowledged like, hey, these two work together. How do insurers, by and large, view OEM certification?
It's important. And I think it's continuing to evolve. And I think that in the next 5 years, things may look different here as the OEs continue to grab hold of the industry, and the older cars in the U.S. vehicle fleet continue to drop off, and the prevalence of ADAS and et cetera are continue to increase. But the insurers have fleets that are most insurers have fleets that are relatively diverse, right? So if you stand by a road and you write down the different models, the different makes of vehicles as they drive by, you got a Honda, you got a Chevy, you got another Chevy, you got another Honda, you got a BMW. That's pretty much what the fleet of most insurers is like. And so insurers aren't going to concentrate and say, you need a GM certification or you need a Tesla certification. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. And the reason I say that is because within a given area, so I was big in Washington, D.C., and that was my most important market. And we would have in that area, I think we had one Tesla partner, and so and maybe 100 DRP partners. Well, a couple times a week, a Tesla would come in that couldn't be repaired at any other shop except the one Tesla partner that we had, right? And so sometimes there's a strategic advantage from the insurer's perspective. And so my answer would be, I don't think that there's a blanket answer. I think that it helps, but I think that your strategy with OEM certifications needs to align with your strategy, your positioning, who you want to be as a shop. And then I would restate the communication with the insurance teams and what they're looking for in your area. Where are they struggling? Do they have a lot of a certain vehicle that they're just constantly struggling with because for any number of reasons? And that may give you some insights. And I think there's some more analytical ways to go about that, right? But generally speaking, I would say start with conversations. What is the local team saying? What does the insurance company need? Can you develop a rapport? And then you can build a strategy on the OEM certs that aligns with what your DRP strategy might be.
Supply and demand continues to resonate here, as does building that relationship and keeping that communication going. What are some gaps and pitfalls you see most often with shops looking to join a DRP, but for one reason or another, they're just not a good fit or not a value add?
I think that over-promising and under-delivering is a big one. I think a lot of shops struggled with that. Maybe sometimes it's because they didn't understand what the requirements were, and that was the insurance company's fault for not explaining that. Sometimes it was, hungrier than they could process, right? So they allowed themselves to get backed up, which obviously is not good. Insurance companies rely on the DRPs quite a bit on the administrative side. So you're the one greeting the customer. You're the one most of the time writing that initial estimate. And we saw a lot of shops struggle to get the right person assigned to the right account, right? Because every insurance company is going to have a little bit different requirements. And so as an owner, you need to understand what those requirements are. And then you need to think about your team and who's actually going to be managing those requirements on your behalf. And we saw large gaps there constantly, right? Things would go well, and then a shop advisor would go somewhere else. They bring in a different writer, and then all of a sudden there's issues, right? Big issues sometimes. And that was a big issue for us many times.
Makes total sense. One of the coolest things I think about your role is the exposure to so many shops, to so many operators across a pretty diverse territory and a large territory as well. I'm sure you noticed there's an upper echelon of shops. You got to interact with a ton of awesome operators. How did the best shops you worked with become the best shops or differentiate themselves to you as the best shops?
I think many areas. I would lead with owner engagement, right? If an independent or a small MSO, as an insurer at the level I want to know the owner, and I want to know that the owner is engaged as I am in the relationship. We're dedicating resources to make this happen. We want to know that you're going to dedicate some resources as well to deliver everything that we need to deliver collectively. And so a good owner is engaged. They're also deeply understanding what their business partner, the insurance company, wants. And with that, they implement tight processes, right? And so they just entered into, as an owner, you enter into a business relationship with a big corporation, the insurance company, and then they take the time to map their own operations to what the insurer needs. And then they enforce those expectations. And so if there's an issue, they know exactly what went wrong, right? They know that if they get a call from the director at an insurance company, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be getting this call. What broke in my process? They take ownership of it, and then they help as a partner to fix whatever happened. And it goes both ways. I don't want to imply any differently. Insurance companies mess up a lot too, and so the call comes the other way, right? And so their team, something is broke on the agreed upon process that we all agreed on. Their team calls the owner, and it flows back to the people at the insurance company that need to know so that they can adjust their own processes along the way. But I think that just rehashing a couple of things that we already said, not over promising. That really was a big one, especially in the time period that in the later years. Over promising, and again, deeply understanding what your shop is capable of, what your technician specialties are, and communicating if there's any gap between what you can do and what the insurance company needs you to do.
Well said, man. Well, I'm going to shift gears on us pretty hard here. You mentioned at earlier on in our conversation, you are no longer in the insurance industry. Tell us a little bit about what you have going on today.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Cole. So I loved insurance, but I got to a day where the golden handcuffs were no longer comfortable, and I decided that I didn't agree with anybody but myself and two partners. So we decided to jump into the world of M&A and investing. We looked around in a few different industries and ultimately decided where can we add the most value. It's in collision. We really enjoy it. I truly love the industry. I think it has excellent macro factors. There's ups and downs. There's things happen. There's tough times. There's good times. But at the end of the day, good economy or bad economy, people are wrecking their cars. We all know that. So cash flows are relatively steady. It's a great industry to invest in. We're hands-on, so I like getting my hands dirty. I was an operator at the insurance company. I was a very hands-on operator. I like boots on the ground. I like moving around, talking to people. So I'm a hybrid between investor and operator in my own view. We founded a company called Arcova Advisors. It's an AI-led exit advisory service. Not exclusively focused on collision, because a couple of my partners have a different exposure to different industries, and so we're a little bit more broad than that. But obviously, I can add a lot of value in this area. We are focused on the space that surrounds the body shops. We love shops, but as every shop owner here knows, there's about 46 different PE firms calling you every day wanting to buy your shop, and we don't want to play that game. So we're looking at the businesses that serve the shops themselves. So think PDR companies, think the distributors, all the different companies that you call and depend on to
big
run
ecosystem. Absolutely.
Ecosystem itself. So we do that, but we also the last couple of years been working with a lot of different small business owners, and find that not all of them are ready to, or not all of them have maximized their value, is the way I look at it. Right? You have an asset. Your business is probably the most valuable asset in your net worth, and not all owners have optimized that and have prepared themselves to actually exit and move. So we're putting ourselves in a little bit before the actual transaction itself, a couple of years, wherever you're at before, and we can help to build your business and prepare it for exit by introducing good, smart marketing strategies. Can help you with DRP relationships. We've got some AI tools. We've got access to some of the best AI developers in the world. Actually, it's amazing what they can do. So we're developing some tools to help focus on each industry, including the collision side. But most importantly, we are in the market to acquire a business in the ecosystem. And so we've got a couple deals cooking, and hopefully very soon we'll make an announcement there.
Love it, man. Well, you mentioned the competition in collision repair, especially. Certainly some activity in the broader ecosystem as well. What criteria do you look for now when evaluating a company in that ecosystem? What do you
Right.
like to see?
Okay, so I think like any other business, so collision has some unique aspects to it, obviously, insurance relationships and all of that, but it's a local game. So I'm going to start with the brand, the local brand. Start with then go into the competition. Where are you physically located? What differentiators do you have versus some of the others? Is it aesthetics? Is it equipment? Is it certifications? Is it technician abilities? All of that. Now, I have a little different view on what a big strategic an MSO might have, because their model would be to put in their own model after the acquisition, right? So we're a little different than that. But really the basics, is it a sound business? Are your P&Ls healthy? Do you have a good source of leads coming in, customers coming in, and is it a diversified source of customers, right? We talked a lot about DRPs. Are you 95% dependent on one DRP? That's a risk. And that's not good from a buyer's perspective to be that concentrated. So have you balanced across different DRPs if that's your strategy? Or if that's not your strategy, do you have good relationships with the dealerships and everywhere, the community itself, to gain leads that way? And then depending on whether or not the ownership decides to stay, there's a large personality factor. Maybe not the best way to say it, but can we work
I think
together,
it's
right?
it's beautifully put. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, can we work together, right? I'm salt of the earth guy, boots on the ground, like I said. We're all here to do a good thing for our customers, and we have slightly different viewpoints, but at the end of the day, we're here to do it together. And so, does the ownership itself share that? And I think that's probably, you need a sound business. You need a sound business. You need good financials. You need everything I just said. But really, the willingness to work together is critical. And are you willing to go through the diligence process? That's not fun, right? Have you thought about how you're going to do that? Is your business ready to do that? And then post closing, post acquisition, what is your role? Have you thought that through? That is something that we ask ourselves. If you haven't thought it through, it actually is something that we take a pause and say, okay, well, you probably need to think about what you're going to do after you sell, because it's good for everybody. It's actually a little bit of a risk for a buyer if the seller doesn't know what they're going to do, because now we're thinking you're going to open a shop across the street. So like, think that through and really try to
Huge.
envision what you look like after the sale as well.
Man, the psychological component of M&A, especially in this industry, is so huge.
Yep.
I say it all the time, man. There are plenty of passionate business owners in HVAC or plumbing or whatever who love their business. In the case of collision repair and automotive in more generality, not only do they love their business, they love their industry. A lot of these guys are going to car shows on the weekend. It's
Yeah.
part of who they are. It's what they do in their free time. It's what they do in their spare time. It adds an emotional piece that makes these businesses so wonderful, but it makes these transactions a little bit more challenging.
It does. It does. We see that quite a bit. Yeah, we do. And I think a part of our role is to help you envision that, right? A lot of shop owners, and really any industry, but a lot of shop owners know that at some point they're going to need to either pass the shop down a generation, or if that's not an option, to sell it to somebody else. Well, that's a massive life event. And, have you thought about what that's going to look like after the fact? And are you able to articulate that? Can you scratch that itch? If you love going to car shows, great, keep going. Can you expand your involvement at those? Or is there somewhere else in the industry that you would really enjoy being a part of? Is it speaking? Is it advising? Is it staying on with the buyout firm, right? Not all firms would do that. MSOs, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, but not all firms would. And if that's something that you want, do you have a partner that wants that and you can work with, right? Do they align in that regard as well?
Well said. Today is a weird time in this ecosystem, no question. Plenty of headwinds we can see coming forward and that we're experiencing today. Plenty of tailwinds too. What risks do you see and what challenges do you see ahead for this industry that you're going to take into account as you're looking for businesses and at
Yeah.
businesses to acquire?
It is okay, I'll answer it from a macro perspective, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
There are
Perfect.
a number of shifts happening. Um, on obviously MSO consolidation that we all know about. Insurance consolidation as well. It's not highlighted as much, but the big eight insurance companies have eaten up about 20 points of market share over the past 10 years. So they're looking for scaled partners. And so there's this natural synergy that's happening between the big insurance companies and the big MSOs. And so what's going to happen there, in my view, is further and deeper integration, and those two parties and the OEs are going to control the narrative more and more and more. What's driving that on the shop side is the capital requirement of the industry. So we all know the technology of vehicles and all of that's increasing. We all have to make investments. Shop owners have to make very large investments to keep up, and either that's not tenable for an individual mom and pop, or it's not something that they're willing to do. But in any case, the big MSOs are better equipped, better financed in order to make those big investments at scale. So I do think that that's going to continue. I think that the forces driving the consolidation and on both sides are going to continue. Vehicles are going to become more and more complex, and so from a investor perspective, I do go back to the basics with that in mind, with those macro views in mind, and is a shop well equipped to stand up to that, or is it better equipped to be an MSO, right, sold to an MSO? But from my perspective, is it a shop that can compete? Do they have certifications? Do they have a niche? Does the community love them? If it's a rural shop and they're the only one out there, that's fantastic in a lot of ways, right? And that's a moat. That's something that we love to see. And so it can come in different flavors, Cole. It can be many different things, but we're really looking for some sort of protection, some sort of positioning that protects that investment, that shop against the macro, and really positions it to ride that macro wave, ride the changes. If you've got certifications and your market is full of Teslas and you have a Tesla certification, you're just slammed with them. That could be a good thing, right? Not always, but it could be a really good thing. And it's all about good strategy, good sound business, and are you set up to ride the wave that's changing the industry?
Ride the wave. Well put, man. Yeah, you zoom out a little bit on this industry, and I'd be willing to say more has changed or will change than is remaining the same. I mean, we are seeing just every component of this industry changing at a rapid pace, from the market dynamics you mentioned with consolidation at multiple levels, all the way down to the vehicles that we're fixing. They're totally different than they once were. The technicians that we're hiring and training are totally different than they once were. That's scary for many, especially many who are coming to the end of their career. It's a compelling opportunity for folks who have that runway, who have that vision, and who have that appetite to ride that wave, as you put it.
Yeah.
Chris, this has been an absolute blast, man. For people who want to get in touch and appreciate what they heard today from you, how can they do that and follow along with your journey?
Great. I appreciate it. LinkedIn is a great place to start. I'm pretty active there. You can email me at chrisc@arcovaadvisors.com. One of those two methods would be great.
Awesome, man. I will include both of those in the show notes. In the interim, Chris, thank you so much for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Great. Thanks, Cole.
A big thank you to Chris Calk for joining me today and offering such a candid look at the insurer side of the collision repair equation. Whether you're already on a DRP or thinking about applying, I hope this episode gave you some valuable insights into how those decisions are made and what you can do to become a better potential partner. And as Chris shared, the future is bright for shops that prioritize operational excellence, understand insurer dynamics, and build scalable, investable businesses. This space continues to evolve, but those who adapt and ride this wave will thrive. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the Collision Vision with someone who might benefit. Until next time, and as always, on behalf of the Auto Body News team and myself, thank you for coming along for the ride.